I finally got my lift springs from Japan, and I'm currently laughing my ass off because they came wrapped in Japanese newspaper, which just puts a huge smile on my face, probably more so than it should. Look at these little Japanese guys. Also came with a nice note saying if I ever need parts, they will source them for me and mail them to me for a small fee, so that's cool. What I haven't figured out yet is which spring goes where. So, it's 4 different height springs. These 2 are real tall. These 2 are shorter, but different. And I gotta figure out what side of the vehicle they go on. Check this out, this is so Japan. Stamped on the spring, JB23 front right. Check out my VIN number right there. JB23. All right, thank you Japan for labeling things way better than Americans ever do. All right, so this one is labeled JB23RR for rear right. And I've got it sat next to my factory spring. And we can see that it's significantly longer, and if you push down on it, it's a lot stiffer. Now, honestly, this spring is broken in, it's sagged, etc. We're gonna put this spring in without any spacers and see how it sits in the perch. If it's nice and tight, we might not have any spacers in the rear. But I did make a full set of PVC spacers in 1-inch and 2-inch configuration, and I've been running the 2-inch ones for a while. They're working great, so if I need to add some more height, I can add height in 1-inch increments. Really happy with these springs though. $64 plus shipping. Granted, shipping from Japan was like $100. So I took some measurements where I started, 10 3/4 inches from this lip to the rim. So we'll do before and after measurements and see how much lift this gets us. Now this 10 3/4 is actually with the 2-inch spacer, right? So it would have sat 2 inches lower than that from the factory. Of course, nothing is ever easy, so I'm trying to get the most travel I can, so I have the longest shocks I can put in the rear without dropping the bump stops. But that means that on the passenger side, aka the left side, the springs are a lot shorter, and even the lift spring sits in here a little bit too loose. So I've got to do a 1-inch spacer, which is I want to do anyway, but the problem was centering. So there's this thing here that centers, we put 1-inch spacer working for, so I had to make this fit over it. You can see what I've done there. Opened it up, bent it, and now I'm going to tap that up onto there, and now I have dropped my centering down, so my 1-inch spacer, which is one of those over there, won't move around. That was not an issue with the 2-inch spacer because you had enough room to have it center like that, but with the 1-inch spacer, this thing sticks down too far, so you got to get creative. All right, so there's the passenger side, aka the right side. The left side, excuse me. This is the left side, or the passenger side, with the spring in place. It's not super tight in there, but it can't jump off at full down travel, so I think that's pretty good. Got a 1-inch spacer up top with that crazy centering thing I just showed you. Eventually I might go to the full 2-inch spacer, but right now this is gonna be about 4 inches of lift, which is probably pushing it until I extend the track bar and a bunch of other shit. So that's what we're gonna do for now. So it should be sitting around 3.5 inches, 4 inches of lift. Of course, we'll take a measurement after. Now I gotta redo the other side because I don't have a spring spacer over there because that is the long spring, this is the short spring. Take your old springs and label them. That way you can put them back on if you need to later, you know what corner they go on. Got the new springs on. They're pretty and red, very nice. There is something goofy going on right now. It is leaning to the passenger side by about 3/4 of an inch. I don't know if you can tell. It's pretty significant to the eye. So obviously I need to drive it around, let everything settle, right? The space is gonna shift around, perches are gonna settle and stuff. Hopefully that gets a little closer. If not, I have to either swap the springs once on the front of the back or make some custom spacers. I'm not sure why it's off that much. These springs are supposed to be corner specific for a right-hand drive vehicle. And when I took the old ones off, the driver springs were a lot longer than the passenger springs, but it was a lot more level with the old springs. So we were at 10.75 with the old springs and 10.5. Okay, so it was off by 1/4 of an inch. Now we're at 12.4 and 11.75. So we're off 3/4 of an inch, roughly, a little less than that. So hopefully it'll settle and get closer. I just did a free caster correction on the truck. you can see where the front of the front trailing arm, or I don't know what they call it, radius rod, you can see where it used to attach up here, and then I drilled some holes and now it attaches down there. Obviously I'm going to weld the washer, nice thick washer, put a bead around here and here to strengthen it up, but that got me about 2 degrees of caster. Pretty good caster correction. So that'll help my springs stay aligned better, and it'll help the steering off-road, because right now if you look over the steering wheel, it wants to be anywhere other than 0. So that'll make a big difference. Obviously the suspension's at full droop right now, so the caster still looks pretty bad. But with the weight of the truck on it, that's gonna get it a lot closer to factory spec, and I didn't have to buy new rods, new radius rods, and radius arms, and these things are beefy, so I didn't want to change them. Good mod. Next, we're gonna cut the Panhard bar in half and make it longer to shift the axle back over center now that it's lifted. As you guys have no doubt caught on, I am morbidly obsessed with my 1998 Jimny. It is the cutest thing ever, and it has features it shouldn't even have. So this is the key, and I recently started looking at it, and I'm like, oh, that's looks like a little IR transparent glass on top of it. Well, yesterday, or a couple days ago, me and my buddy were looking at the truck, and we're trying to figure out what the hell this thing on the mirror is beneath the light. It also looks like a little IR receiver. Well, lo and behold, this freaking truck has keyless entry. All right, so we took the Jimny out to Suburban yesterday, romped it around the whole property pretty much. Didn't go through a whole lot of mud because I'm still waiting on my low gears for the transfer case, and these tires are very big and aggressive. But it did have a few minor issues. There were some popping noises from the springs binding and stuff. So today I did some caster correction. I took the axle and I twisted it up by changing where one of the bolts on the track bar, or what do they call these things, like a radius arm, where that arm mounts. I changed where the bolt hole was, welded on some washers, and I got about 2.5 degrees of caster back. So that helps the spring align better, and it helps it not helps it steer better, because right now when it's rocking on the front, right, if it's sitting on top of the tire, it wants to be anywhere but 0. So I had no self-centering after the 4-inch front lift because I had really bad caster. Also, the axle shifted over pretty far, so I cut the Panhard bar, welded in a 1/2-inch spacer to shift it back over. So now at regular ride height, the axle's perfectly centered. Obviously, once one side droops, it's going to shift a little bit versus the other side, because there's some asymmetry there with any kind of Panhard bar. And I also added the locking hubs, which are very premium. But that's what the mod for the caster looks like. You can see the old bolt hole on top and where it is now. Pretty sweet. And then that's where I cut the Panhard bar and welded in a 1/2-inch spacer. It is sleeved too, so there's a small pipe slides into the Panhard bar, about 3 inches on each side. Welded that, ground it smooth, put a spacer over it, welded that again. So it's very strong. I don't need to really do anything in the rear. The rear has a longer radius rod. So you can see even with a 3-inch lift and 3.5-inch lift in the rear, the rod's still pretty flat. Also, the rear has a longer Panhard bar, and it's the mount for it drops down lower. So in the rear, the axle didn't shift nearly as much as the front because of geometry. Also, it didn't lift the back as high. The front has about 1/2 inch more lift than the rear, and that's just how everything kind of came out once I got it leveled out. I'm pretty happy with how it's sitting now. Once I get the 4-to-1 transfer case gears, this thing's going to be an absolute unit, and then I can go test out the snorkel. Didn't want to test out the snorkel in the current configuration because I want to know if it's running well underwater, because the engine is dry. I don't want to be stalling because it's geared too high, and that give me weird, symptoms. Very comfortable suspension with 4 people in it. Oh, also, I got a little $10 Amazon FM adapter. So you can set this on a radio station and it broadcasts to your radio. So now I have Bluetooth so I can jam out. And it's also got some nice USB ports, some pretty fast PD charging built into it. So yeah, nice little mod.